Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. In less than 2 months' time, we are going to have presidential election in the United States. In case Vice President Harris is to be elected, then we expect there is going to be continuation of, President Biden's security and foreign policy. But in case it is Mr. Trump to be elected, then we expect there would be quite a change in US foreign and security policy. So there is much, curiosity about what shape the change will take and how, in fact, we should be preparing ourselves toward that change in US foreign and security policy. So they are very important questions, and in order to answer those questions, I'm glad to tell you today we have two most qualified panelists with us. The first panelist, General John Kelly. Of course, he used to be first general in US Marine Corps, and under President Trump, he used to be Secretary of Homeland Security, as well as he used to be Chief of Staff in the White House. And we have Mr. Andrew Kim, who in fact had several decades of service in US Central Intelligence Agency, and as part of it, he used to be the head of, Korea Mission Center. And then in that capacity, he used to work very closely on North Korean nuclear issue, including the summit meeting of Singapore and Hanoi. So let us just welcome these two panelists with warm applause. So General, without further ado, let me just raise this question with you. And then Mr. Kim, anytime you want to jump in, and then you can jump in. So my first question would be about Ukraine. Because, recently Mr. Trump gave, interviews, large number of interviews, and then one of them he said, if I get elected as president, I can end Ukraine war in 1 day. That's what he said in one of the interviews. And then I was just reading it, and I said to myself, were it to happen, if we could end war in Ukraine in 1 day, then the only way we would be able to do that would be through imposing draconian package upon Ukrainians. Otherwise, it would not be possible. But were we to do that upon Ukrainians, then in fact, it will have the effect of boosting autocrats around the world, and in fact, letting down democracies around the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is, and I'm not making a joke here, if he knows how to stop that war in a day, I wish he would tell us now. Because the amount of death and destruction and human misery, on both sides, is just simply awful. And a war brought on the Ukrainian people by obviously a dictator is a terrible thing, and we can't let it stand. Now, there's a lot of discussion about, why did Putin decide to do this? What caused him to think the United States would not, in NATO, would not get involved? Someday someone will write a book about that, and we'll all know, I guess, but there has been, and I'll admit it as an American, there's been an erosion around the world. I travel a lot around the world, Europe, Middle East, Latin America, Asia. There has been an erosion of people's perception in the United States wanting to stay involved, and we've talked about that here a minute ago. And then again, that's the problem when good men and women, partners and allies, step away from responsibility of trying to deter these things. One of the things that with the former president we would talk a lot about is the North Korean ruler brought this up to him one day to say that, all of the U.S. troops in South Korea and South Korean military capability is provocative, and if they just did away with that, then I wouldn't have to have nuclear weapons and all that. Of course, it's foolish for him to say that, but as I've had this conversation many times, and many people have had this conversation many times with the former president, and that is, these arrangements we have, whether it's with the people in this part of the world, NATO, is to deter war, to prevent war. And yes, if war breaks out, then to win a war, but it's not to go to war, it's to deter it.
Thank you. Well, we just talked about Ukraine, so let me just move on to China, especially what is happening in the straits between China and Taiwan. So I'm again quoting one of the interviews of Mr. Trump, and then what he said with respect to Taiwan. I mean, he was asked a question: in case there is military action from China against Taiwan, what would you do? Mr. Trump would not give any assurance with respect to U.S. commitment to protecting Taiwan against military invasion by China. Instead, he said, well, Taiwanese, they should be paying more for our protection, for the protection we provide. And then he went on to say, complain that, well, Taiwanese, they took semiconductor industry away from us. So that, in fact, was the answer coming from Mr. Trump, which, in fact, made many people in Taiwan rather deeply concerned about commitment of Mr. Trump to security in Taiwan, which, in fact, can have the effect of, in a sense, encouraging Chinese to do something against Taiwan. So I was a lot concerned about when I read the interview, and I was just trying to wonder what your thinking would be.
Well, I think you're exactly right. If countries like Russia and other countries, if they think they can get away with it, they'll try to get away with it. I mean, the whole point of deterrence is, once again, that you have military capability, that you can ultimately win a war. And just as importantly as the military capability is a commitment by the leadership to say, we will do it. And so we will use the military capability to defend NATO or countries here in this part of the world. If the bad men and women in the world don't think that you have that commitment, then they'll poke away. And clearly, I don't like to say Mr., but he clearly thought at that point that he could make his move, because no one said anything to him in 2014. No one said anything to him when he did some of the other things in the Caucasus. And frankly, if he's allowed to get away with this, there'll be a next one, and then a next one. I believe this commitment on the part of my country, the United States, to Congress, and it would be tough, I think, for the former president, if he's reelected, to simply walk away from helping, because the NATO countries are particularly the ones up close, are in an absolute panic.
Thank you, General. Well, Mr. Kim, let me turn to you and then try to raise several questions with you. Well, when there was Singapore summit between Mr. Trump and then Chairman Kim, and then the following year there was Hanoi summit, and then by the time of Hanoi summit, there were quite a few people in Seoul who in fact were expecting certain progress to be made to resolve North Korean nuclear issue. And then at the end of the day, nothing happened. And people were just wondering what in fact was responsible for that collapse of the whole process. And then I still remember that in Hanoi, they were supposed to have lunch between Mr. Trump and then Chairman Kim. And then Mr. Trump, he just skipped the lunch. And then he came to meet with the journalists. And then I still remember what he said. And then what he said was, he said, do you know what denuclearization is? It's very important. And Chairman Kim, he was not ready for that. That's why I walked out. That's what I still remember from the press conference. But you were there, so what happened? I mean, why we couldn't make any progress?
No, thanks for asking that question, but I wasn't there.
You were not there?
No, not in Hanoi. I was in Singapore.
Okay.
But I know what happened in Hanoi. So if we just go straight to Hanoi, why it failed and whose responsibility? Well, responsibility of the failure in Hanoi is definitely is North Korea, because they miscalculated U.S. intention. And leading up to Hanoi, and I try to just go straight to Hanoi, but I have to go back to Singapore. So in Singapore, surprisingly, Kim Jong-un asked straight to President Trump during our meeting. The one thing we didn't expect, because that was very early on in our relationship with North Korea, Kim Jong-un asked President Trump in fact, he spent about 5 minutes trying to explain to President Trump how important Yeonbyeon facility is for their nuclear program. He went on for about 5 minutes of that whole background of how important Yeonbyeon was, to the point where I thought the Chairman Kim was expert on the North Korea nuclear program because he really knew the Yeonbyeon facility. And then he asked President Trump, say, what if I give up, get rid of Yeonbyeon? Would you get rid of all the sanctions? And I was a little nervous that President Trump might give a wrong answer to that. But actually, President Trump said, you know, Chairman Kim, I think you're thinking in the right direction. And that's kind of direction that I like you to thinking forward. But Yeonbyeon is not enough. And that was it. So when President Moon visited Pyongyang afterward, and he came back and he said that he clarified or he heard Chairman Kim's intention, or he's willing to get rid of Yeonbyeon, right? That wasn't first time. I mean, we heard before directly, right? So we weren't surprised. And going forward to Hanoi, it's been more than a year. And we've been keep telling them that's not enough. But somehow, Kim Jong-un thought that was enough. So he brought that back in Hanoi. And we were hoping that he would bring more. And Steve Biegun, who was chief negotiator, he was out there a week before Trump and Chairman Kim arrived in Hanoi. He sat down across the table with his North Korean counterpart and said the same thing. Your chairman should bring more than Yeonbyeon, because we know more than Yeonbyeon that you have, other facility. I don't know why that his counterpart didn't communicate with chairman, or why chairman think he still can push just Yeonbyeon to get the result. I don't know why, but because he did that, and President Trump realized there's no advancement since what he said, what he told them in Singapore. That's why he walked away.
Well, Mr. Kim, that in fact is an amazing answer. I in fact was really expecting that we'll be able to get something very interesting from you, but I didn't expect it would be this interesting and in this helpful. And well, really, my question only gets deeper. I mean, in fact, you have been communicating very clearly that Yeonbyeon would not be sufficient for almost a year, but somehow they wouldn't listen. So that's very interesting. Thank you so much. So, well, General Kelly, let me just turn to you once again. And last time when we met, it was several months ago. And then last time when you met, then you reminded me once again how serious Mr. Trump was with respect to this idea of pulling out U.S. forces from Korea, right? And then, of course, when there is possibility of Mr. Trump getting back to the White House, then in Korea, that concern, that fear is spreading once again. What would you tell them?
Well, it's true that when people are elected to high office, certainly in the United States, they have strengths and weaknesses. Mr. Trump's strengths were, real estate in New York City, and just had not been exposed to the almost limitless other issues that he was going to have to tackle as president. And the job is so complex and so big, but the key is you surround yourself with people that are very knowledgeable on whatever the topic is, and will help you, Mr. President, make the right decisions. I can remember when we were here, when I was here with Mr. Trump, we're flying with Vince Brooks, I think, was in the vehicle. Anyways, and Vince was talking about the various military bases, and Vince wasn't told to do this, but he was telling the former president that yes, the South Korean government helped us acquire that, or yes, the South Korean government is paying for this, and yes, and so. In that trip, he began to change his mind, at least relative to South Korea helping pay for the commitment of the United States forces that are here. So that's a good thing. And over time, I truly believe over time, we worked this issue sufficiently that he, when I was there certainly, backed off in this idea that, that South Korea is doing a lot in doing more. And again, as a new guy just coming into the presidency, he didn't know that. He didn't know a lot of these kind of things. And so people like me were and Andrew Kim, spending a great deal of time getting him smart, whether it was on NATO or drug interdiction or, Southwest border issues or whatever. And I believe that will continue. I mean, if he's reelected, he will come in once again, saying a lot of things, but the nature of the U.S. government is not, and it's designed this way, not to be able to let one person do anything he or she wants to do.
Maybe that was one of the. Please go ahead.
I can add one quick thing about, since you had that question and General Kelly answered this. I remember there's one point, I don't know, General Kelly, you remember, in the Oval Office, out of blue, President Trump asked us, agency, to give him a report about justification for why we should have a U.S. troop in Korea Peninsula. And I was surprised. I mean, he tasked us, so we have to answer his question, but I knew exactly why he asked us when General Mattis was there, where that's Pentagon's issue, but he didn't ask General Mattis, but because President Trump knew exactly what he's going to get if he asked that question, tasking to Pentagon. So he thought asking agency we might come up with something that he would like to use as his justification. That point I realized, that was early on in the administration. I got a phone call from Secretary Mattis. I got a phone call from many people who were very concerned about how we're going to draft that report. Because there's a like mind, people around at the time, President Trump, that we got to take this kind of idea of President has out of his, mind. So what I can, at the time, what I can promise to everybody is that when we draft that report, we'll make sure we send it to you before, so everybody kind of have agreement, right? So we did that, and then I remember our report was about 3 pages, and there's a summary, half page. President looked at the summary and he put it down, and he just put it away because he saw in a summary that what we wrote was exactly the things that he didn't want to hear, right? Right. And we never asked again, right? So what I'm trying to portray here is that, yes, he will have people around him, even if he's reelected and is going into second, there will be people who are actually looking at views with importance of ally, how we should be position ourselves with allies in dealing with the international issues. I think there will be people like that. Yeah.
And these issues are so intertwined that what Andrew described, all presidents do this. Why can't we withdraw the Marines or the military from, say, someplace? And all of a sudden, CIA comes in and says, well, we need to be there with them because they provide logistical support or whatever. Or the State Department comes in and says, no, we need the military to stay there, A, to protect us, B, to put pressure on the terrorists or whatever. So oftentimes, it's not the military that's making the argument to do something or stay in. It's State Department, Commerce, Treasury, the interagency, as we call it. And again, I go back to almost every president that comes in remarks about how he quickly learned how complex these issues are. They're not simple. They're just not simple issues. And when you're trying to do something to protect a country or an ally or a partner or something like that, the whole government is involved, not to mention other countries that have come in to help. And every president really comments on that very early on in their memoirs and whatnot about how complex it is and how interchanged everything is.
Right. Let me just raise this wrap-up question for both of you. Well, last year, we celebrated 70th anniversary of alliance between Korea and United States. And whoever is going to be elected as president coming November, then I think most probably that president would have to continue with this 70-year-old relationship, mutual security relationship between Korea and then the United States. We already talked about General Mattis. In our conversation this afternoon, we already discussed about General Mattis. And then whenever I think about General Mattis, what I heard from him in January 2017, when he was just getting inaugurated, I still remember what he told me in our first meeting. He said, well, United States is strong because of the allies we have. And, well, Andrew, he just talked about President Trump wishing to know what do we get out of stationing our troops in Korea, right? So I think it would be a great answer that he could have got from General Mattis. I mean, United States is strong because of the allies we have. So with all of that at the background, what would you recommend to the new president? How to further strengthen the alliance between Korea and the United States?
I would say keep doing what we're doing and have been doing for 71 years. I mean, in 4 days' time, the 74th anniversary of the landing of the Marines at Incheon, and then took the airport and ultimately Seoul with Army help, in Republic of Korea help. But and in that conflict, we lost nearly 40,000 young men. That's an investment. That's how I see it. In fact, some of them are buried here in large numbers. That's an investment. And the lesson we learned from in my opinion, from World War II, the Korean War, many wars, is if some force is not out there helping deter violence, deter action, and to help save peace, then we'll have nothing but constant wars. So what I would tell anyone that would get elected is, it's worked for 71 years on the peninsula, and we still have young men in their thousands buried there. This is a good relationship, and we should deepen the relationship, I think, by buying, we talked about this, buying more equipment and things like that. This country produces magnificent ships and things like that, and I think we should deepen our relationship by setting it up, because we're not doing so well in terms of shipbuilding in our own country. I'll leave it go at that, Andrew.
Yeah, actually same kind of view with General. So if we are talking about Trump, if he's the next president, and we got to kind of tailor to sort of how he think and his thinking process. So alliance is 70 years, they're strong, but usually backbone of that is the military. But in Trump, he's going to thinking more beyond that. So now our alliance between United States and Korea is not just the military, but it's economy and trade and investment. So I think South Korean, we got probably from advising the President Trump, let's look at beyond just the military, the relationship, but also what the South Korean has done in the United States in terms of creating jobs, investments, okay, and what we can do with them. And there's, as General Kelly mentioned, Chinese can produce a manufactured ship about 200 times more than U.S. How can we as U.S. government can fill that gap? You got two huge world-class shipbuilders in Korea, and they're best in the world. Can we work with them? I mean, there's a lot of opportunity we can, the U.S. government can take advantage of having this relationship. If I have one recommendation for the Korean government, if they need to deal with President Trump in the future, the French General de Gaulle said, if you're not at the table, you are on menu. you gotta have to be very proactive, engaging with President Trump. And it's not a humble thing. You need to advertise how much, as a South Korean, as government as well as the industry has done to benefit the United States. I think that's what they need to do.
I really like it.
And on the trade issue, I should mention this. When we would brief on any issue, didn't matter what was being considered, we always brought in, the Commerce Department people and the Treasury Department people. They say, okay, if this happened in the South China Sea, what would the impact be on the world economy?
I see.
Or if this happened in the Arabian Gulf, Straits of Hormuz, what would be the impact on the world economy? And of course, the whole world is so interconnected. These kind of conflicts would be devastating to the world economy. So the argument would then be, but if we're there, these wars are less likely to break out. And that was another whole aspect that, as a military person, I had never thought of it very much. But the impact on the world economy, which would immediately impact the United States economy, immediately impact, everywhere. So the idea of, preventing war is infinitely cheaper than war.
Right, exactly. So thank you so much. And then, well, as a matter of fact, when I was beginning, I very much hoped that I could be sparing some time for Q&A with the floor, but with only 15 minutes to go, I came to find that it, in fact, is not going to happen. But at the same time, in order to make up for that, we, in fact, have the most qualified two panelists to answer this very critically important question facing Korea now. So let us just wrap up this session with big hand to our two panelists.